Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show today. We're talking to Dr. Lewis Baldwin, and the topic is police and the decline in status of race in America. And so, Dr. Baldwin, over the last 10 minutes that we have here, let's give you an opportunity to sort of summarize, in a real sense, some of the things that can be done in such a way that we can leave with our audience this morning what they can find and pick out among these options, what they can do in order to help the whole situation.
Yes, I think we would agree that we are at a critical point in this nation's history. This is 2016, and we're still dealing with antagonistic and tense relations between the black community and law enforcement. What we need, first and foremost, are voices of reason and objectivity. We need voices like President Barack Obama. And President Barack Obama, of course, is walking a tightrope because he's trying to show, I think successfully, that he supports law enforcement, that he understands that without law enforcement, we live in a society characterized by anarchy and lawlessness. But he's also speaking to the issue of police misconduct and the killing of black men. So we need those kinds of voices. Unfortunately, we aren't getting many of those. On the right, the political right, we hear many who are critiquing Black Lives Matter, who are critiquing President Obama, and in many ways blaming them for the problems that we encounter in terms of the relations between law enforcement and black communities. But they are trying to come up with solutions. And I think we need to understand that we have to move in 4 directions. First of all, we have to emphasize the importance of education. And education is very, very important, as Dr. King taught us, and as a King scholar, I would recommend that, is that you change the mind, you enlighten the minds of people when it comes to education. Religion is important in terms of changing the hearts of people. Then you need legislation and court action, of course, the kind of laws that will respect the dignity and worth of all human personality, not simply policemen, but also African Americans and people of other ethnic and racial backgrounds, and finally, nonviolent direct action. Now, one of the groups that I see today that embodies all of these approaches to the problem, of course, is Black Lives Matter. They're very much concerned with nonviolent approaches to dealing with the issues of not only racial profiling, police brutality, but also inequality in the criminal justice system. And I think we got to deal with all of these issues if we're going to solve the problem. We've seen over the last couple of weeks not only the killing of Philando Castile out in St. Paul, the killing of Alton Sterling in Baton Rouge, but we've seen the killing of police officers in Dallas and Baton Rouge. And we need to understand that we aren't going to solve these problems that exist between the black community and law enforcement until we take this fourfold approach: education that changes the mind, a religion that changes the heart. And you recall when President Obama eulogized those 5 policemen in Dallas, he talked about the need for a new heart. Dr. King talked about that in 1968, that we need a new heart. Okay, so you not only change and enlighten the mind, you change the hearts of people. You also work through court action and legislation, laws to make sure that people's rights are respected. Not only people you don't want to set up a double standard of justice, one for police and one for citizens. It means that all people, the rights, the life, the liberty, the dignity and worth of personality of all people should be respected. And finally, nonviolent direct action. And I see Black Lives Matter as engaging in these kinds of approaches today in order to improve black community relations with law enforcement.
You know, one of the things that I think you'll notice, Dr. Baldwin, and you've probably heard people make some statements in reference to it, is that Black Lives Matter has been maligned
Yeah.
by many people.
Exactly.
And I think that we see that organization as trying to accomplish exactly what you laid out there.
Exactly.
That they are, in a real sense, instead of trying to create a problem, they're trying to
solve
deal
a
with a
problem.
problem, solve a problem.
Exactly. We need to keep in mind that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was accused of creating problems. He was accused of initiating violence. But what he was concerned about was what? Eliminating violence and bringing about goodwill and cooperation between peoples of different racial, ethnic, and political, religious backgrounds. And if you look at the Black Lives Matter, it's not a black movement. It's a movement made up of blacks, of whites, of LGBT people, from the lesbian, gay, transgender communities, people of different religious backgrounds. They are coming together to fight for equal rights, for justice. Not only for people in the police department, but for people in our local communities. And they understand that if you're going to resolve this problem, you need people who speak with the voices of reason and objectivity. And you don't see a lot of that on the extreme right. You don't see a lot of it on the extreme left.
And so, in a real sense, if we could all get behind some idea in terms of trying to bring about better relationships between the police departments and the African American community or minority communities, or the police department and other communities.
That's
because
right.
African Americans and others
Black
are
and
not
brown.
the only, all of us are affected by this, and if we think in terms of trying to bring about a better relationship and each person commits himself or herself to that idea, you think we might be able to accomplish something?
I think we will, and I would add that the upcoming presidential election in November 2016 will have a great impact on whether or not we're able to translate certain kinds of ideals and values into a system that is beneficial to both black communities or minority communities and the police or law enforcement. Because we need a society in which the rights, the dignity, and worth of all people,
persons. I
of
agree with that.
are
That's
respected.
That's exactly it.
And I read recently where there is an effort in Tennessee to come up with a Blue Lives Matter law, which increases the penalty for the abuse and the killing of police. We need that for all Americans. We don't want to give the impression that we're setting up a double standard of justice in America, and too many of us give that impression. We need a standard of justice that benefits all citizens, that recognizes that people in law enforcement are like the rest of us. They are not above the law. They must conform very much to the values, the standards, the laws embodied in the Constitution, just like the rest of us.
And you know, Dr. Baldwin, I might be too optimistic in reference to this, but I think that as a historian, you've had an opportunity to see race relations from slavery up until now. And we know that there were atrocities that were committed during these earlier periods up until now, that there would be nothing like that today, etc. And so we overcame lynching.
That's right.
We overcame burning.
That's right.
And we overcame all of these things. And in many instances, when we overcame them, the law was often involved with that. I think you mentioned Emmett Till. Well, the law was involved with that.
That's right. You can't engage in those kinds of practices anymore, lynchings and burnings. And so we need to understand this whole issue in a larger historical context and come up with solutions that involve not only our religious institutions, but our orders of police around the country, fraternal orders of police, federal government. And I think we can solve this problem. Otherwise, as Dr. King pointed out, if we don't learn to live together as brothers and sisters, we will perish together as fools.
And I'm optimistic, Dr.